Well, for those of you who were here last Sunday, you know that I brought in a sign, a beautiful sign that said Namaste, that was given to me last month by Annie and Marty after their wedding. Well, it's show and tell again today, because I brought in another sign. This sign was gifted to us by Barb Lucier, and it hangs over the street in our retreat house. And I know it might be hard for you to see, but this sign displays the golden rule in all of the world's faith traditions. And I brought it to show you today because obviously that's what part of today's gospel message was all about. It's the gospel where Jesus gives us the golden rule, where Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would like to be done to you. And you'll see on this sign, in all of the holy books of all the faiths, it says the same thing. In Hinduism, do nothing to others that would hurt you if it were done to you. In Buddhism, do not offend others as you would not want to be offended. In Judaism, that which you do not wish for yourself, you shall not wish for your neighbor, and so on. Now, some of you may say, well, did they steal the golden rule from Jesus? Well, I told you before, Christianity is the baby religion. It is one of the youngest religions of all the world's religions. So if anything, they could say Jesus stole it from them, because they said it first. They wrote it first in their holy books. What I find so amazing is that every single one of the world's major faith traditions says this. Whether it was written 1,000 years before Jesus, whether it was written in Asia or India, it doesn't matter the country or the language or the time period. It appears in all the holy scriptures of all the world's major faith traditions. It's unbelievable. And when I think about it, I think, well, maybe it isn't as surprising as we think. Because if we believe there are many paths and there's one God, then that one God, that one love, speaks in all those languages and cultures saying the same thing. And if this golden rule appears in all the faiths, it's probably something that we should be focusing on as human beings, to make sure that we treat one another the way we would like to be treated. That's the golden rule and the message of Jesus in today's gospel. Now, everyone in their bulletin this morning received this brochure from the United Church of Christ. This brochure on the front says, 3 Great Loves. And this is the kickoff to the United Church of Christ's latest campaign. This campaign comes directly from this morning's gospel message. On the back, it says, Matthew 22, to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. So, from the fall of 2017 now to the fall of 2018, the focus of the United Church of Christ is going to be on this, on these 3 great loves: love of neighbor, love of children, and love of creation. And this logo is going to appear on banners and buttons and bumper stickers and on tote bags and t-shirts. Greg has already taken away my credit card. I really love this campaign. I think it's very important. And I have to say that I am very proud that Douglas UCC already does these things. We've been demonstrating love of neighbor through our Stephen Ministry program. Our Stephen ministers visit one-on-one with people in our congregation each and every week. We demonstrate our love for neighbor for our work with Christian Neighbors, the food pantry here in Douglas, which was founded many years ago by 2 members of this church. We demonstrate our love of children through our work with the tutoring program at Douglas Elementary School and by our annual drives each year for backpacks and school supplies and at Christmas time with clothing and toys. Our social justice team has demonstrated love of neighbor by helping out the people of Flint, by helping out the people at Standing Rock, and by helping out the people who have been affected by hurricanes this year. And of course, we've been demonstrating love of creation. Our creation justice team has been doing amazing work this year with beach cleanups and recycling events and educational nights. So I'm very, very proud that our little church has been doing these things. And we have been that love in action in the world. But Jesus' commandment in today's gospel is actually twofold. It's love of neighbor, yes, but it's also love of God. Now you may say, well, when I clean up the beach or I give money to the people at Standing Rock, I'm showing my love of God. And that's true. But what if Jesus is calling us to something else with this? Many of you know that a group from our church went to New Mexico last year, and we went to a place called the Center for Action and Contemplation. Action and contemplation. And one of the main purposes of that center is, it says, we need a contemplative mind in order to do compassionate action. We need a contemplative mind in order to do compassionate action. Now, the United Church of Christ is a church of action. Many Christian denominations are. They're doing wonderful things in the world, building schools and hospitals and homes for the homeless. They have soup kitchens and bread lines, and they do so much action, and it's good work. But the Christian church, including our very own denomination, the United Church of Christ, has not been very good with teaching us to be contemplative. We're more a church of doers rather than a church of beers. And I think Jesus, with these two great commandments, is calling us to be people of action, love your neighbor, but also people of contemplation, to love God. So what does it mean to be a person who's contemplative? What is that? Well, a contemplative is someone who is attuned to the master's voice. So think about a dog. A dog is attuned to its master's voice. A dog recognizes its master. When it hears its voice, it responds. Jesus didn't use that analogy. Jesus used the sheep analogy. Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. They know mine, and I know theirs. It's this intimacy, that knowing. To be a contemplative means to spend time each day listening for the voice of God. So my question for you this morning is, have you heard it? Have you heard the voice of God? You know, in the United Church of Christ, our motto is, God is still speaking. We believe that. But are you listening? Are you making time to listen? Thomas Keating is one of the main speakers in the world on centering prayer. We had a centering prayer program a few Sundays ago. And he says, silence is God's first language. Everything else is a poor translation. And in order for us to listen to that language, we have to be still and rest in God. So I'm glad we're doing all of this action in the world. It's great. But I also want to make sure that we make time to be still and know. Like Scripture tells us, be still and know that I am God. We need that time in the silence first, and then we will know how to take action. Now, I had a very wonderful opportunity this week to just be. I went to a Benedictine monastery, and I stayed overnight there. It's just outside of Three Rivers, Michigan. And there are 7 monks who live in this monastery. And the entire time I was there, we were in silence, except for the times of prayer, which were 5 times a day. Now, the monks who are there, they don't have soup kitchens. They're not marching on Washington. They're not going out and building homes for the homeless. They've devoted their lives to contemplation, to devotion, to just being still in the presence of God, listening for the voice of God. Now, you and I are not monks. We live out in the world. That's our calling. We live in a world that is very hectic and very noisy and very chaotic. So it's important that we be contemplative. Jesus also lived in a world that was very noisy and hectic and chaotic. Jesus was a person out in the world. He wasn't a monk. He was out among people and he was taking action. He was teaching people. He was healing. He was working miracles. But he was also a man of contemplation. And throughout the Gospels, we see him going out into the desert alone for extended periods of time, going up to mountaintops alone, so that he could be still and listen to the voice of God, to know God's will, to become one with the one. Contemplation and action. We need them both. So I'd like to read to you this morning from a wonderful book called Contemplation in Action. It's written by a Christian writer named Andy Otto. And in that book, he says, contemplation allows us to renew our active lives so that all we do does not become mindless action, but rather glorifies God. And then the cycle repeats. Your activity leads you again to a time of stopping and resting and reflecting, and then returning to activity with greater zeal and purpose. Being a contemplative in action means that your active life feeds your contemplative life, and your contemplative life informs your active life. That is what contemplation in action means, and the cycle never ends. I love that. And so, my friends, I would like to this morning call you again to be contemplative. I am so grateful to you for all of your good action in the world, and that action will continue. But now I'd like to also call us to find time each day, every single day, to be still, alone with God. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. You know, when you're in love with somebody, you just like being in their presence. You don't need any words. You don't need to do anything. It's just because you love them so much. That's what we're doing in contemplation. God, I love you so much. I just want to be with you. I just want to spend time with you. We need that in our lives in order to know how to take action. We need them both, love of neighbor and love of God. So let us recommit ourselves to doing that this week and in the coming year. Namaste.